Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to the Islamic Vice podcast. I'm your host Majid, and today I'm joined by my co-hosts, Brother Rash and Brother Khairul. Assalamu alaikum, brothers, and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you, bro?
Alhamdulillah, well, man, it's been a while since we've had you on the podcast, Brother Khairul. I think over a year, I reckon.
Was it the COVID lockdown one?
Oh man.
No, I think I came on one after that.
Okay.
I remember. I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but yeah, it's been a while. I don't generally do a lot of these. A lot of the other brothers do. So yeah, got this opportunity. I think it's a good topic, inshallah. So yeah.
Yeah, of course, man. Of course. Obviously, Rash is the regular on here, but it's good to have you on, and
Exactly.
And it's a topic as well, inshallah. It'd be really good to get your thoughts on. But I think we'll just go straight into it, guys. And today's topic, as people will know, is about what's going on in Iran. We can see that. It's nothing new. The issue is about a month old now, around a month old, where on September the 16th, we saw that a woman in Iran, a Kurdish woman, she died. Okay. And the reason why she died, the reason given is the fact that she was arrested by the morality police because she wasn't dressed appropriately, and allegedly she was beaten and then she collapsed and she had a heart attack. And since then, I think it took about 48 hours since the news got out. From then till now, even yesterday, the protests have been ongoing, and we've seen, some of the videos that have been coming out where you have cars being put on fire. You've had actual exchange of real ammunition fire between the security forces and the protesters. And also what we've seen is videos where a lot of women, maybe younger girls, shall I say, schoolgirls, have been taking off their hijab, or shall I say headscarf is probably more appropriate, even though it's being called a hijab, and they've been setting it on fire, or they've been waving it around during these protests. And a lot of spotlight has been put on these protests via the international media, and the main theme that's being pushed is the fact that people are, the women, they are seeking freedom and liberation from the Islamic dress, from the hijab, which is mandatory in Iran. Even though, to be honest with you, from what I know from knowing people from Iran, different areas of Iran, it differs. In some places you'll see that the dress is a bit more conservative. Other places you may call it a hijab, but I don't think we would even call it a hijab, based on the standards that we know. However, there is a mandatory hijab rule in Iran. So, a lot of the discussion has been based on women's rights. Should women be able to wear what they want? Does the state have the right to actually enforce a dress code for men or women, and so on and so forth, right? So we see that that's being pushed. However, there's a lot more happening behind the scenes, okay, which hopefully, inshallah, we'll touch upon in the podcast. So Brother Rash, really, just to get you in on the discussion, really, what's your thoughts on what's been going on?
Yeah, so it's an interesting discussion, really, isn't it? Because like you've already highlighted, there's lots of different angles we can go down. So you can discuss, obviously, the legitimacy of some of these regimes and these countries, and then on top of that, what legitimacy they have on enforcing rules. You can then talk about why the West has taken an interest in this when there's many other things that are happening in the world that often, be it Palestine, be it the Uyghur Muslims, be it, in Burma, wherever, often the West is very selective. And I think that's definitely one that is worth discussing. So why is it that they've decided to jump onto this? So I would start off by kind of let's talk initially about what happened there and what's specifically happening in Iran, because what the Western media or the media that we most often might consume makes you think is that, oh, okay, it's all about oppression of women. It's all about, women not wanting to wear the hijab there. It's about Islam being, something that people are against in terms of, oh, they will want to dress according to the Islamic dress code. And it promotes this, when in a world where feminism is now dominating, it promotes this idea of patriarchy, where because the mullahs and the ayatollahs and people there, those men are dictating what the women should wear, and they're doing it forcefully. So that's what they're trying to promote. And in Iran, we know that these problems in terms of the clash between the leadership or the regimes and the people, it's been going on for many years. But what's happened now is that this is a very convenient tool to be able to push that idea that Islam is oppressive towards women. And the reason why it's so easy is when something like this happens, they try to promote it as if this is how an Islamic state would look. If you want to live by Islam, there's people who promote an Islamic political system, and Muslims believe in Islam being involved in politics. Well, if that's what you want, here you go. This is what it looks like. It looks like people, morality police going around enforcing the hijab, beating people up to the extent that someone is killed. Yeah. So that's the side of it. So on the face of it, that's what they're trying to achieve. They're trying to promote that kind of view. But anybody who does any more kind of digging immediately realizes actually the hijab, this has just been used as a tool in this particular instance. This particular scenario that's happened is quite convenient for the West to jump onto it, to put pressure on some of these countries and then make them do whatever's in the interests of the superpowers. So that's where I think we need to dig a little bit deeper. To answer a simple question, should this have happened? Should they be beating people and killing people for not wearing the Islamic dress? Of course not. No Muslim correctly will say that, Islam says you beat, torture, and all of these kind of things, or oppress people in this kind of way in order for them to wear the Islamic dress. But equally, at the same time, the Muslims know and the sisters know that this is an obligation. Wearing the hijab is an obligation. But when you have a society which is almost like a crackdown society, where you are enforcing things and people maybe haven't carried the right ideas, you do get this issue sometimes where you will get people revolting against it. However, that revolt isn't what they're trying to promote as, because the majority of people, even in the protests themselves, there's lots of people that are in hijab going, oh, completely fine with the hijab. It's just that, oh, we're against the authorities and their heavy-handed tactics. So that's the bit that I'd kind of initially tried to put out there for us to discuss, because it's those heavy-handed tactics and the way the leadership is governing Iran, which is the problem. And in this case, the hijab has just been used, or this instance has just been used as another mechanism to have that anti-kind of establishment, anti-regime protests, basically. So I think that's one area. There's other areas I think we can go into afterwards.
Yeah. No, loads to talk about, even with what you just said there, to be honest with you. But let me just get Khairul's initial thoughts and stuff, and then we can maybe dive a bit deeper into some of those aspects. Khairul, bro, what's your initial thoughts on what's going on?
I mean, just jumping off of what Rash said, I think just in that short comment that Rash made, there's so many different angles that you can go down. And if we want to go down the angle of, okay, why is this actually gone down this route? Why are the media pushing this in this way? It's important to kind of understand. Well, my first kind of initial thought was, hold on a second, why is it that people are protesting about Islam and the rule of hijab, anti-Islam and anti-hijab protests out there, and this propaganda going out, instead of protesting against police brutality, for example. Because when we see police brutality everywhere, right? We covered a podcast on it when all of the George Floyd things occurred. When that occurred, and we saw that police officer put the knee on George Floyd and he died, the protests that came out were against racism, were against police brutality, against Black people, and you see the whole BLM movement, right? We didn't see people start burning symbols of Christianity or burning symbols of democracy and liberalism. No, they were actually protesting against the actual problem, right? So in this occasion, you would have thought the protest would be, this police brutality. But what happened was all of these liberals, and I have to say that they're the minority, not the majority, the liberals, the secularists, those who are already kind of anti-Islam, use this to start protesting against Islam and protest against the oppression and forcing of certain Islamic rules upon the masses, and saying, look, we don't want to live in this way, or we want freedom to wear what we like. And the Iranian regime are forcing us. Look what they're doing. They're even killing us. So first thought was that, like, okay, why is it that it's gone down this route? And we just have to look historically, right? The West, we know, I think for our listeners, first and foremost, we need to understand that there's an attack on Islam, right? All aspects of Islam is under attack, especially the political aspects of Islam. And they historically use hijab, the rule of hijab, as a way of attacking Islam and spreading their kind of liberal, secular ideas of freedom and these type of things, and oppression against women. So it's no surprise that when this occurred, you start to see, okay, they've started to use this as a way of attacking and spreading their kind of liberal ideas of, women should have a right to wear what they like, whether they want to wear hijab or not. The state or the government should have no say in what women wear. There's no, women are fighting for their rights, for the freedom to choose, right? And they're starting to push these liberal ideas which are not from Islam. So that's the first reason. They use this to promote their kind of ideology. And secondly, they use hijab historically to attack or to target the women and the Muslim women and sisters, because by attacking and targeting the Muslim women and secularizing them, then what you're doing is, in turn, what they want to do is secularize the youth. It's obviously the first point of education for our children is our mothers, right? If you can secularize the Muslim women and the mothers of the Ummah, then you are in turn secularizing the children and future generations. So these are the two reasons. But it's very, we can touch on this again, and I don't know if I'm going on too long, but it's really important to understand how did this kind of protest come about, and how was it directed? Because initially, when it was being reported that this sister, Mahsa Amini, had like a heart attack and went into a coma. And then the next day they kind of changed a little bit and said, no, it was a cause of the arrest. Something happened during the arrest and then she's in a coma now. And then on the 16th, when she died, it came out through Twitter and social media that she had been beaten. And it was the beating that caused her to have go into a coma and die. And that's when, in fact, when the protests kind of erupted. So it might be interesting, I think, just to kind of touch upon why that occurred.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, the thing is I think it's without a shadow of doubt that the events that are happening in Iran are being managed and directed from America, from abroad. We see that, a lot of the noise that's coming out, Iranian activists who are outside of Iran in the West, they in America, and even if you think about it,
just before, sorry, Maj, just that point you made there is really important, because one of the main Twitter pages on Twitter, one of the main kind of voices was this woman from Iran who lives in America, Her name is Masih Alinejad, right? She was actually in Iran as she was anti-government, and she was campaigning for this against the compulsory hijab law, and she was exiled by Iran, and she now currently lives in America, in New York, and she actually works for the US Agency for Global Media, which is actually an independent agency of the US government. And it was her tweets that actually were one of the main reasons why these protests kind of kicked off. This woman who's a US government employee, basically.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
bro. And even if you think about when Iran, the regime in Iran tried to like restrict internet access, because obviously what you got to understand is, and you can understand from a point of view where if social media and internet is being used to kind of facilitate the anger and pushing it towards anti-regime hatred, right? And also, like you mentioned there, that it's, you know, the main Twitter page is from America, right? That's directing and inciting people. Then you probably see why a regime might want to control the internet access of what the people are consuming. So we see that they did this, they restricted it, and you just need to look at the tweet from Anthony Blinken on 23rd of September, where he said, "We took action today to advance internet freedom and the free flow of information for the Iranian people, issuing a general license to provide them with greater access to digital communications to counter the Iranian government's censorship." And you even saw, like, you know, Elon Musk, where, you know, he made Starlink available to the Iranian people, right? And if you look back quite a few years ago now, and when in Egypt during the Arab Spring, when the regime had a ban on internet, had a ban on Twitter, and what did you get? You got the Western access of text to tweet. Text to tweet, given so that people can use Twitter in order to arrange these demonstrations, the meeting points, you know, where the leaders were directing people and causing, I mean, well, from the government point of view, is causing unrest. Okay. However, we see this involvement. So I think, you know, it goes without a shadow of doubt that America is using this to attack Iran. But not just Iran, to be honest with you. I mean, this might go into a different area, but if you think about what's being attacked here, like you made a really good point, Khairul, it's, you know, you would think if something like this happened, the issue would be police brutality, right? Police brutality. However, this has changed into something to do with the Islamic social system, on the way Muslim women dress. And then what do you get? You get, I mean, the funniest message, or shall I say, well, yeah, it is funny, to be honest with you. Let's put it that way. Was messages from Israeli women giving their support to the Iranian women over the issue of hijab, right? And it's just so silly because, you know, it's like, wait a minute, when your soldiers are bombing and humiliating and imprisoning women in the occupied lands, right, then there's no issue with that.
Mad.
But here you know, and actually it was a TV advert. It was like a, you know, really good message in the sense where money was spent on it. It wasn't just someone randomly
on Twitter.
On Twitter, this was actually, you know, put together, proper media savvy. Right.
Well, this is another reason why I said there's so many kind of offshoot topics here. So the whole media side of it is a good offshoot topic to speak about, because they're trying to promote that, oh, we are the bastions of freedom. Look at us, our people. We allow them to have free, open access to the internet. They're allowed to say whatever they want. Look at these backwards regimes in the Muslim lands that, you know, at every opportunity they block internet and they block access to social media and all of these things. But the irony, and it's not even ironic, it just shows the hypocrisy really, is that they themselves are the ones that are using social media to engineer their masses. We all know about the Cambridge Analytica stuff, We all know about the fact that during COVID, they clamped down on anti-vaccine kind of messaging, anti-government policy messaging, anybody who was opposed to the government narrative. We know all of these things where they use these platforms. And imagine, you know it yourself, you know, they go and do things like shadow banning now. They've gone beyond just banning people off the platform because they try to show some degree of, you know, transparent, as in they try to show that, oh no, we let people post whatever they like, but then they shadow ban you. So even the other day I saw that, you know, CJ Werleman, who posts all the anti-Hindutva stuff and stuff going on in the, you know, in India, he was saying like, I've got nearly 200,000 followers, but when I post something, 20 people see it. Wow. You know, is it, so it's just, so this is what these, you know, your Facebooks, your Meta, your Google, and all of these that are all kind of, they all have, they're part of the deep state now. People need to realize that these guys are part of the deep state. And even Andrew Tate said this, that, you know, when they tried to block him off all the platforms, initially, this is what is crazy. And again, I don't know if there's an element of conspiracy behind this, but I'll mention it and people maybe look into it. But what happened was when he was blocked off one platform, he suddenly went on his devices. He was blocked off everything in a second. And he was like, I couldn't even order an Uber. I couldn't even order, you know, because nowadays, you know, when you log into stuff, it goes, would you like to log in with your Apple ID? Or would you like to log in with your Google ID? Can you see how everything is so intrinsically tied together? All it takes is like someone somewhere has got this like one kill switch, press that button and all of a sudden you're off. And that's their level of control. And they're trying to teach the Muslims that the Muslims are the ones that are, you know, clamping down. But what I would say, just to clarify for the listening people, is that this issue can be a bit nuanced because you have to be careful. No one is supporting the Iranian government here either, because the way the Iranian government is treating their people, the way they're structured, the way they're in power without the, you know, the authority of the people, the way they're not implementing Islam, we don't support them. Yeah, and we should be expecting Islam to be implemented in accordance to the Quran and Sunnah. So you have to be careful that what you end up doing is you almost end up taking sides a little bit, and you can't take sides here, because what you see is that the way the Iranian government are implementing and enacting their governance is flawed, but equally the way you then don't want off the back of that to support the Western messaging, because then it almost looks like you're attacking the Iranian regime, and that means you're in support of, you know, the liberal ideas that America is pushing, you know, the feminist ideas that they're pushing, all of these things. So that's the bit, I think it's a bit nuanced. You need to be careful to expose both, and personally don't become a pawn in one strategy or for one side or the other. And yeah, the whole media thing is interesting. Where that links to, just our second point, and you guys can tell me what you think about this, is, you know, this whole idea of dress code. I think it's important just to cover that a little bit, because the idea is that they kind of say that, oh, you know, Islam has this dress code, it's oppressive, sisters need to cover, they don't want to, you know, they try to say that they don't want to, because that's their messaging. We know that sisters cover because they want to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what they try to highlight is that, oh yeah, you should let them wear whatever they like. So I was doing a little bit of research, and I could see that, you know, even as late as like the 1970s, there was a lot of there was protests, and there was also a lot of people in the Western countries who were against women and what they were trying to promote as what they wear, even up until, you know, like when the bikini and stuff like that was initially came out, it was banned. You know, it was completely banned. So we, from an Islamic point of view, we know that the Islamic dress is governed to us by our creator for men and women. And that's one sole reference point. And it's a reference point that hasn't changed in 1400 years plus. Yeah, whereas the liberal way of looking at it is their dress sense started at one thing which they agreed on, and then when someone promoted something, the masses were against it. So the masses were against that that kind of clothes that I mentioned, and it took the media, and obviously in those days there was no social media. It took Hollywood and movies to promote it, in other words, to show it and show the masses and then normalize it for them to gradually get people to adopt it. So anybody who says, oh, it's a headscarf, you know, what's the problem with women taking off the headscarf? Let them live like however they want. They're not looking at history at the slightest. The Western world, it started off as a, you know, take a little bit off, take a little bit more off. And then what ends up happening naturally, and history and their way of life absolutely 100% testifies to this, it gets to the decadence we see today. So any Muslim who tries to go, oh, you know, a sister should be free to wear whatever she likes, you know, and it's just the headscarf. And again, this is the minority, you know, most of them would say, no, this is a rule from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we should be implementing it. But anybody who tries to say, well, if someone wants to wear what they want and no one should be able to say anything about it, well, this is what it leads to. This is, we see it in the West, what it's led to. And that's the bit that they don't promote. They just try and show it as freedoms. But the hypocrisy of the West comes out very, very blatantly in stuff like this. And people, I think, are becoming savvy to it because they realize, wait there, why aren't you talking about the other issues that are happening? You know, I think in India, was it one of this actress, Priyanka Chopra or something? She's supposed to be a UNICEF goodwill ambassador. Yeah, so she's getting a lot of grief on Twitter at the moment because she came out in defense of the Iranian women who are burning the hijab. And then everybody's like, wait there a minute. So when your country wasn't allowing Muslim sisters to wear the hijab to be able to go to school or college for education and was being denied education, you didn't say anything. So if you're so much about women's rights and stuff like this, you didn't say anything about that in your own country, you know, as a nationalist, but now just when it favors you, you're saying this about the Iranian women. So you can instantly see through their agenda. It's very, very hypocritical.
Yeah, no, sure. I mean, I got a few points to make, but Khairul, I'll bring you in first, bro. If there's anything you want to respond based on what Rash is talking about.
Yeah, no, there was a lot there. Now, I think just on the last point there, although there's a lot of criticism for people like Priyanka Chopra, if that, you know, she's and her silence, they are using a lot of other personalities to promote freedom in the other way. So Malala Yousafzai, she was the one who's coming out in against the ban, the hijab ban, saying, and it's very clever, the messaging. So she's against the Indian government for banning the hijab, but the messaging and the reasoning that she gives is women should be allowed to wear what they want, whether they want to wear the hijab or not. And that's where Muslims need to become a bit more savvy and not just jump onto the bandwagon of all these, you know, this propaganda and this messaging that comes out after incidents like this. Because the messaging and the propaganda right now from the liberals, and it went all over social media, was exactly that: freedom to wear hijab, choice, right to be able to choose what to wear or not. And then because the incident was so, you know, heinous, Muslims and sisters and brothers as well, who probably couldn't understand the nuance of the messaging, jumped on it because they were like, yeah, this is wrong, and started promoting these messages, not realizing actually what I'm actually saying, what would be the effect of this messaging that I'm promoting. So yes, there's a lot more we can speak about, but I'll let you come in there, Maj, and then we can carry on, inshallah.
Yeah, I think, you know, I think, like you said, sometimes Muslims need to be a bit more political savvy. I mean, first of all, I think the message generally for Muslims is that we need to have knowledge of our deen, and we need to have knowledge of our history. And the reason why I say that is because what the world, the way it is now, it's basically being run by the capitalism, liberalism, right? And what the West actually are very good at doing is sending this message that basically their culture, their values, their way of living is actually a universal way of living, and it's the correct way. Now, what happens is that Muslims fall into this, where what we will see is there will be problems within the Western civilization, which they are trying to solve in various ways. And then the Muslims will think that actually we need to do this also within our lands and within Islam. But that's not the case. I mean, the feminist movement and, when the women's movement started hundreds of years ago, whatever it was, this was a problem that the West had in regards to, depriving women of certain rights, whether it was voting, whether it was, owning property and inheritance and all this sort of stuff, right? But most Muslim women never had that problem, okay? For 1400 years, they never had that problem. So what's happening right now is when this discussion of what women should wear, what they shouldn't wear, and this and that, this is a problem within Western civilization, the ideology of secularism. Why? Because it's man-made. So you're going to have these questions of what's enough, what's not enough, how much should we show, how much should we not show of the body, right? Because it's fluid, it's always moving. But Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us already about certain rules, about the dress code of men, the dress code of women, the certain rights that we have on each other in society and so forth. This is something which is fixed. So you can see why these questions and these problems keep occurring in the Western world, is because their system is made from their own desires and the way they want to satisfy their, how they want to achieve, they want to maximize sensual gratification. That's what it comes down to. But Muslims is different. So when Muslims are having this discussion about, and I saw a few YouTube videos, should the hijab be, what's the word, Rash?
Enforced,
right? And all these, and you had these guys coming on and these, knowledgeable guys, and they were giving the answer. And so one could argue that, okay, fair enough, because this issue is being asked, they're addressing it. However, in reality, this is something which, why are we asking this question? Because if Islam is being established in a land and it's a genuine Islamic state, what that means first and foremost is that state is built on the Aqidah, that the people, the masses, understand what Islam is and they want Islam to be implemented over them. And then you have the government, the authority, which then implements and manages their affairs based on the ideology that the masses want. Okay.
Yeah.
So in an Islamic state, women who want to live by Islam, they would be dressed in a certain way. You understand? Why would you need to enforce it?
Yeah.
Now, if you go to a state, and it could even be a Muslim state, where Muslims, they're not really sure about Islam, or maybe they've been influenced by liberalism and all these type of things, right? And now, if you then say to them, okay, from today you're going to dress in a certain way, then you may need to enforce that because people don't want it. But then that doesn't make it right. So the point I'm saying is that as Muslims, what we're doing is that the problems of the West, right, we are then trying to look into Islam with those same lens and ask those same questions, which, listen, as Muslims, we can't do that. And we shouldn't do that. We have no need to do that because our deen is complete, right? Rash, just over to you, bro.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say that's really, really important to look at it with that lens. I think that's the problem sometimes, and certainly for us in the West, and be it ourselves or our sisters who sometimes, they're the ones that probably get asked by other people, what, are you forced to wear that? And they're the ones that are having to deal with the question sometimes. So I think it's really important what you highlighted about looking at it through the right lens. I think someone could counter that question and go, oh, Iran's had religious authority for all of these years, these last few decades, why haven't they been able to get the right messaging across to their populations to prepare them for being ready for, for wearing the hijab and living by Islam? And it's to an extent is a valid question, isn't it? Because what we're saying is that if the Muslims are ready to live by it, then there shouldn't be a need to enforce it, as that's what they try to promote. But what they don't look at is that a lot of these countries, a lot of these flags that are being given to these countries, and a lot of the ways that where they might even say that they're implementing Islam, they're not. So, for example, just take the two, take Iran and Saudi Arabia. Look at those two, and the way that their approaches have been like that kind of top-down, brutal crackdown type of approach. Yes, they're teaching people from an academic point of view, but they've completely not succeeded in making sure that the masses embrace Islam in an intellectual way, such that they recognize that, look, this is the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is how we should live, and then prosper off the back of it. When you've got other countries, and certainly Iran is an example of this, where you've got like America oppressing those countries economically, then a lot of the people are suffering economically in those countries, be it the prices of things, be it the living standards and stuff. So what naturally happens when that correct way of thinking and that intellectual way of proving your Aqidah isn't there, is what happens is you start looking outward. You start looking towards the West and going, okay, especially when you're not here. When you're here, you might actually, this is bogus, this society is decaying. From afar, sometimes you don't see that. From afar, you think, oh, in those countries, maybe they're economically better off, so maybe we need some of what they have. So it's more natural to look at it from afar into these Western countries. But actually, none of these places, even though they've had authority, be it Saudi, be it Iran, have succeeded in correctly implementing Islam, because they don't, correctly preparing their masses to embrace Islam in the way where people understand the importance of these things. And even if they have, like you say, these issues are easily triggered by media. So there's millions of people in Iran are more than happy to be wearing the hijab. There's people who are supporting the government that is there. But what always happens is, especially based on what Khairul was saying as well, they can instigate these movements, because especially in some of the, like Tehran and stuff like that, where you get some more of the people might be more modern. And we see it in some of the Indian subcontinent countries as well. Like where from Bangladesh, you see that vast majority of people are pro-Islam, pro-Sharia, Islam being a way of life, all of those things. But often what it is, the leadership and those in power, they're the ones that are secular, and they're the ones that are able to promote that type of messaging. So you get a disconnect between the leadership and the people. It just so happens in the likes of Iran, you think that actually that's a Islamic government, Islamic in terms of they that's what they try to portray, but actually what they're doing is they haven't succeeded in making sure that the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is implemented on this earth. So I do think that discussion needs to be had as well, and it's probably a wider topic, really.
To be honest with you, bro, in regards to Iran, the reverse has happened, and let me explain. I mean, you probably know there's a brother who from Iran who we know quite well, acts as an activist, and if people want to listen back there, we record. Well, actually, it wasn't on this podcast; it was on the Voice of the Ummah podcast, Talking Deen. There was a podcast we did on when Qasim Soleimani was.
Oh yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And what you got to understand with Iran, in 1979, when the Iranian Revolution happened, what you saw, and if you look back at the videos, you will see, probably you would see then, in 1979, hijab. You look back at these videos, women were covered in the correct way, right? There was a uprising, there was a revolution, there was a demand for Islam. And this wasn't just Islam as in just as a belief, but as in political Islam. Okay, we understand that they follow 12 Shiaism, right? But the point is that from their point of view, it's still Islam, right? They want Islam. What you've actually seen is since 1979 till now, due to the corruption of the mullahs and the ayatollahs, what's actually happened is from a society which wanted Islam, right, moved and shifted to now where people don't want this regime. And what's happening is because they're looking at these mullahs and these ayatollahs as Islam, when they come out and they are maybe burning the headscarf, or maybe they are like, some weird stuff where some people say they're burning Qurans, but that's not, you can't make an excuse for that. But when they're attacking like government buildings or pictures of Qasem Soleimani or whatever, even though it may look like it's against Islam or the Islamic Republic of Iran, actually it's just against the regime. So what's happened is a lot of the youngsters now, I would argue, and this is from discussions with the the brother that I know, is that a lot of youth now in Iran, actually they're more secular. Because what they view as Islam is this corruption and this enforcement of what the Iranian Revolution, right, what the regime has done in all these years. And the only way, so when they are actually speaking out against them, you can see why, because they see them as being the Islamic representatives, they will then attack certain Islamic concepts. But in reality, it's their issues to do with sanctions and all this, the media being pumped in on how you want to live life, and all the millions of Iranians, liberal Iranians that are living in the West, who are, who maybe got podcasts and radio channels and beaming all this into Iran, like this is how you want to be living your life. These mullahs are, oppressing you. And so what we see then is that the Iranian government, and a point that I want to make, but I kept it till now, based on what you said, Rash, is definitely we're not supporters of the Iranian government. In fact, the Iranian government has been in cahoots with America, some would argue, since the time of Khomeini, right? America's move after 9/11 in the Muslim world, in the Arab world, in Iraq and stuff like this, could not have happened without Iranian collusion, right? And what the Americans need, and this is why even these demonstrations, right, they may target the Americans, and the West may push it towards some of the social aspects of Islam, but it won't bring down the Iranian regime, is because the Americans need the Iranian regime. Look, just built on this Iranian regime and the threat of it, they've been able to bring in the normalizers. Exactly. To try to recognize the state of Israel and bring it into the region based on the threat of the Iranians. Okay, so whatever's happening out there, this is all political. But going back to the issue about, like you said, that people may say, well, the Iranians had all these years to do it. In fact, what they did actually has done the opposite.
Exactly.
And it's not Islamic in any way whatsoever.
And we're seeing the same in Saudi now with all of this Jeddah festival and all of these kind of things. So,
and that's the thing, bro. Sometimes you might want to paint a rosy picture, but when 750,000 people, if that number is correct, turn up to a rave in Saudi Arabia, right? That's not a small number. Exactly. And I was speaking to a relative of mine, and he was saying that, these reforms that are being pushed, they are popular with the youngsters.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is because they've never experienced it. So now you're giving it to them, right? They're like saying, whoa, this is amazing, right? But going back to your point, that understanding of Islam, first and foremost, hasn't been put in them. And secondly, human nature, you give them something like this, it's raves, parties, women free mixing and alcohol and drugs and stuff like that. If it's purely based on the human nature, you're going to be loving it.
Yeah.
And you give them a taste, they're going to want more. And you see how Islam as a system is preventative, how the rules of Islam, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the creator who understands the creation, has set rules so people don't taste it. Because when you taste it, there's a good chance you're going to want more.
Yeah. And that was actually the point, it leads on to the point that I wanted to make, that you need to understand that Islam as a system is there to protect society, right? It's there to protect society and of normalizing publicly sinning, because that leads to what? It leads to a corruption in society. It leads to fahisha. It leads to all of these social ills that we see in the West. You know, like Rash said, like people outside may not realize, but come here and you start to see the social ills of society, and you want to stay away from that. And Islam is, you know, the rules are there to protect society from that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, Allah sent us these rules to enable that the society, Islamic society and the Muslim society can flourish, can benefit from these rules. So, you know, the rule on hijab, you know, people, and it's really important that Muslims look at it this way, is they look at the rule within the context of a secular system. And they don't look at the rule in the context of a true Islamic system, right? It's not the rule, we're not against, the rule itself of the hijab being mandatory is from Islam, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded this in the Quran, in Surah An-Nur, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and say to the believing women that they should lower their gaze and guard their private parts, and that they should not show their charms in public, right? And the verses goes into other things, but I won't recite the full verse. And the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, in Abu Dawud, that when a girl reaches puberty or starts the menstrual cycle, it's not right that any part of her be seen except her face and the two hands up to the wrist. Okay, so this is the Sharia rule, and any state or government that implements or adopts Islam will implement these Sharia rules, right, to ensure that the Muslims are abiding by the Sharia rules and by the Sharia obligations. And that's the same with everything, not just hijab, but with alcohol and interest and riba. It will ensure that the Muslims are abiding by these rules or not falling into these things, and also will ensure that the Muslims are openly or not openly and publicly neglecting other obligations like salah and fasting during Ramadan and those type of things. Now, that doesn't mean that the state is forcing them to adopt those rules, because like Maj said, the key thing that we need to understand is that any Islamic state, its foundation, it's built upon a strong Islamic foundation, right? The people in an Islamic society under a state have accepted Islam, they agree with Islam, they want to live by Islam, their opinions are for Islam, their ideas, their thoughts, everything are for Islam and the Islamic thoughts, and they want to live by them. And so therefore, the rules are there in place to ensure that the Muslims abide. But if somebody goes against that, a specific rule, then the rule is therefore there to be some sort of enforcement, right? But when you understand that a state is built like this, it'll be very, very rare, if it will ever happen, will people be openly and publicly breaking Islamic rules and publicly sinning in open like this. Because if you understand how the society is built, then you know that these will be very minority cases. And so in a situation like this, let's say, for example, a hijab, you know, the state would not need to interfere because the society itself will be built in such a way. So if a sister came out into public without wearing the hijab or inappropriately dressed, the first people to stop it will be her family, right? The family will make sure that they put a stop to this, because this is not normal, it's not okay. And if the family doesn't, then the neighbors and the men in the society, and especially the women in society, will put a stop to it. And then only then, if there's like constant violation upon violation, maybe the state will then get involved. And even then, it wouldn't be a brutal crackdown like we see in terms of, beating and stuff. No, they will talk to the family and make sure that they understand the rules.
And this is not even foreign, is it? Because like if someone in these societies starts walking around without any clothes on, then the police will come and probably take them and force them to wear it. So the issue isn't one of, like covering your hair. The issue is one of what should the government be able to do in order to ensure a certain criteria, a certain benchmark. It just so happens the Islamic benchmark is high, and the Islamic benchmark is consistent, and the Islamic benchmark started at the beginning of, when Islam was revealed, and it will stay till the end of time, because it's from the Creator himself, the Creator who created us. So who better to set the benchmark than the Creator himself? So, and the difference is that, and that's why I mentioned it earlier on as well, and I think it's relevant to the point you just made here, is that people will say that, okay, why can't one element of it be loosened? But history testifies that as soon as you loosen one tiny element, the rest of the rules just go with it. Look at now what's happening. So keep it topical. There's a World Cup coming in Qatar. Yeah. So Qatar up to now have been saying that we're not going to allow alcohol in our country. We're a Muslim country. This is our culture. When you come here for the World Cup, there will be no, initially anti-homosexual, no homosexuals or those acts, as well as no alcohol. But what have they had to do? They've had to compromise now. So they've got these so-called fan parks and places where people can go and drink, So what happens is, yes, at first it's like, oh, okay, that's so rigid, that's so strict. But as soon as you let go one tiny bit, as soon as you take that little bit of the scarf off, or, oh yeah, we can show the top of our, some sisters nowadays, they show a little bit of the front of their hair or something. Gradually what happens is like, okay, a bit more. And then that's what we saw in these societies. They themselves had clothes that at one point, you look back at some of the really old black and white pictures of these countries, women were covering up. They recognized the importance of modesty, not just for the individual. They recognized how important that was for society. As soon as you allow decadence into society, you corrupt it. We live in a society where now, those things happen openly. On top of that, pornography and all of these kind of things are prevalent. What you see on TVs and stuff like that, it's got to a point where they're normalizing every single thing that at one time in their own civilization, they would have said, oh, we can't put that on a movie. Oh, Watershed, you can't put that on before 9 o'clock. What happened? Where did that Watershed go? And gradually they themselves should realize, and they won't, but because it's on the falsehood, they themselves should realize that actually we've caused a lot of the problems that we've got today. Look at India, rape capital of the world. Yeah, the more rapes happen in India than anywhere else in the world. Why? Because of the likes of Bollywood, where, they objectify women to such an extent that, I think you watched it as well. There was that docu kind of series. It's a more of a series, but based on true story. That woman who was raped in a bus or something, and then really blatantly, anyway, yeah. So really badly abused, yeah, and died off the back of it. When you think about those things, how can that even happen in a society if you haven't normalized this idea of, women are objects, and if you can't satisfy those urges that all of this programming is giving to you via social media, via pornography, via movies, or by all of these things, then what's naturally going to happen is, and then you don't have a concept of Jannah and Jahannam in terms of, there's an ultimate, judgment. It's natural for you to go, you know what? I've just got the urges too much. I'm just going to do something, whoever cares about the consequences. And we're seeing that. And it might seem like an extreme, but as soon as you remove just one element, this is just a slippery slope. It's a slippery slope from one to the next to the next. And they can't argue against that because they themselves have seen it in their society and they're trying to export it into the Muslim lands. I say trying, sadly, they've already exported it into our lands.
And just the other point, just to add on to that, is there's this argument that, clothing or what I wear is a personal choice. But actually, is it a personal choice? You know, when you're doing it in your home, whatever you wear is a personal choice, right? But as soon as you step out of your front door of your home, it's not a personal choice anymore. Now you're affecting upon the rights of society. Okay, you are forcing other people to maybe see what they didn't want to see or are against. So it's no longer a personal choice now. It's now a right. It becomes a societal choice, right? It's now a public matter. So even that in itself, that idea is wrong when you think about it deeply. It's not a personal choice when you decide what to wear out in public. So,
absolutely,
yeah, that's another point to mention there.
Yeah. I mean, that's all about individualism.
Yeah.
It's just about you, and that's the thing. You know, in reality, for Muslims, and obviously we say Muslim women, but let's just mix it up a bit. If sometimes if I go to the swimming pool, I haven't been in a long time. Well, not a main one. I did go in another country once, but generally when you used to go to swimming, you'd make sure that you wear those long shorts, from the belly button down to the knee. And there were some swimming pools where they would say, "Listen, that's too long. Yeah, they're too long." Right? I don't know what their reasoning was, but they're too long. But obviously, either you wouldn't go there or you try, just evading them or whatever. But the point is, though, even as men, you have that issue. So also, sometimes if I'm looking to go to a gym, I'll make sure that, ideally I want a gym where in the changing rooms there's cubicles, right? Because I know there's a certain aura, there's a certain part of my body which I can't show to somebody else. So it's not just about women, it's the men. We have that same issue as well, right? But what it comes down to is the limits set by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a Muslim woman, from her point of view, what she has to understand is that, and not just a Muslim woman, every human being, Muslim or non-Muslim, the reality is that the whole universe, everything in creation is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator. Our bodies are like a trust. We're given it and we use it and then we die, right? And that's why there are even rules on how to what you can and can't do to your body. I mean, one of the rules that people talk about a lot is you can't harm yourself, right? But if you had rights to do whatever you want to do because it's my body, then why is that anyone else's business? No, but you can't have tattoos, you can't do certain things, you can't do things which are gonna harm yourself, like some people argue smoking and all these sort of things, right? So as a Muslim, we understand that our bodies are the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and it's a trust for us. So if the thing we have, which is which you would think, like, somebody can steal your wallet, somebody can steal your car, they can't steal your body. I mean, it's you, isn't it? It's you. If the most fundamental thing that makes you, i.e. your body, is the property of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Then on what grounds can you say, I want to do what I want, or no one has a right to tell me what to do? What are you talking about?
Even as little as, certain hairs on your body, certain parts need to be removed at certain, within a certain number of days. You have you have personal free will to abide by that. And that's another topic that's come up in this whole debate as well, about free will. If you have free will, then how can there be punishments? And again, that's a warped understanding of what free will is. But yeah, you don't, from an Islamic perspective, there's certain rules you need to abide by.
Yeah, so
I've even seen,
go on.
sorry, just very quickly, I've even seen people, and this is quite new, I think, I'm not sure, but I've seen people now using the verse of "there's no compulsion in religion" and applying it to this, saying there's no compulsion in religion, so therefore I can follow the rule or not follow the rule.
Do whatever I like.
yeah, the liberals are now using this and are misapplying that verse when we know this is to do with belief and entering into Islam or not. This has got nothing to do with, well, once you are Muslim, whether you're allowed to follow a rule or not. I mean, yeah, it's completely crazy, and people are falling for this.
Yeah,
People, and that's why it's really important that we understand. We culture ourselves to tackle these kind of arguments.
yeah. I mean, this is the attack of the modernists and the reform and the Quranists and the Quraniyun and those people who reject the Seerah and the Sunnah. All of this is in order to try to change Islam. That's just the way it is. So when people are looking at it from that point of view, they are negating clear ayat of the Quran, Hadith, which they probably don't know about. Had they done a bit of research, they would know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it's not befitting for a Muslim man or woman to have a say on a matter when Allah and His Messenger has decreed on it, has passed on it, have had their say on it, right? So even being a Muslim, being the one who submits, submission is like, if you in MMA or something, in UFC, the guy's he's doing a submission move, right? And he's saying, look, submit, I'm going to break your arm, right? He doesn't allow that guy to say, oh, but I'll submit, but then I want to do this X, Y, and Z. He's like, no, I'm going to keep putting pressure, and if your arm breaks, it breaks, but you have to submit. There's no leeway. So what kind of submission is this, where you can submit, but then you have your own you have your own decisions as well, which go against that submission? So I think a lot of Muslims, we need to look in-house and look in ourselves and look in our deen, and also just a final point for me, and then I'll get your final thoughts as well, is some of which Rash spoke about, and it is really important that Muslims do point out the hypocrisy that we see of the West, certainly where you have these like worldwide protests, held in solidarity to the uprisings in Iran and for the women, and with slogans of women, life, liberty, and where are these demonstrations when in India, for example, women are not allowed to wear what they want to wear? Or let's just say in France, in India, where the Priyanka Chopra example you gave, I'd like to see what she would have said, and she might have said something about it. But in Gujarat, for example, where when the Gujarat riots happened, and the sister, I can't remember her name now, she was raped, and the people who raped and killed her family, they were imprisoned. They got released, they got pardoned, a few months ago. And it has been a bit of a hoo-ha. How can, these are convicted rapists and murderers, right? Where was this? You got people in the West cutting their hair in solidarity, right? But when women and children are being bombed in Gaza and all those places around the world, where is this? This is all hypocrisy. It's all political. They don't view Muslims as human beings. And that's the reality of it. Millions of people have died. Millions of Muslims have died. And that's a fact, right? Nobody cares. No one in the West cares. And you could just just drive around your locality, you'll still see Ukrainian flags. And it's fine. I don't want to see a Palestinian flag if that exists. I don't want that solidarity from them. But what I'm saying is, this is my message to Muslims. Don't get fooled into this hypocrisy, right? Because then what we start doing is we start using their benchmark, we start using their view, and we start looking at our lands, which is the Muslim lands, with their same lens and with their same solutions, and look at the problems in the same way as they are. And then, unfortunately, what will happen? We'll start calling for those same solutions. So we'll jump on the bandwagon against the Iranian government, but not because of the fact that they're not establishing Sharia, or the fact that they have been pushing the American agenda for decades. Not because of that. Why? Because Muslim women, they've been forced to wear a headscarf. That can't be right. You understand? We're going to fall into these traps, and that's what my message is to the listeners, to Muslims, specifically to Muslims, that we need to be a bit more political savvy. And to be political savvy, you have to know your deen. You can't be political savvy in regards to what's happening against Islam if you don't understand what Islam is. So Rash, I mean, normally we go the other way around. That was my final comment that I sort of like merged into that comment I was making, man. But I'll get the final thoughts. So Rash, I'll start with you, bro.
Yeah, so I've just got a couple. I promise to try and keep them short. I'm not very good at that. So firstly, I think your message about political side, people should look at also the political realities on the ground. So the pressure that's being put on Iran on these kind of issues is, like you say, yes, there's a liberal feminist kind of approach to it, because they recognize that this is a way to get Islam under the thumb a little bit by showing these kind of things. There's that side, but there's also the other political dimensions to do with, if they can get Iran in a situation where they know that, okay, if they continue promoting these uprising, it can have an effect on the leadership. So that in itself, when it comes to like the nuclear deal and stuff, they'll be able to push, they'll have an upper hand. You know, they already got an upper hand, but can you see how when it comes to certain other foreign policy aims, as soon as, you know, you've got these issues happening, American can quite easily go, well, okay, if you don't comply by what we say, you know, JCPOA and stuff like that, for that agreement, and that's what Biden wants to happen, then it's easy for them to, you know, it's easy for America to have their way when Iran feels like they're under pressure for maintaining their power, you know, the people, the leadership now. So there's that side of it that we should look at, because what happens is everything focuses in on hijab or whatever happens specifically, but people don't take a step back and go, actually, there's more to this. There's other ways that this whole agenda is going to be used. My second quick point is the hypocrisy one. Something happened over the weekend that was interesting from a hypocrisy point of view. So you must have all seen the bridge between Russia and Crimea, where there was a bombing there. And look at the messaging, you know, even like the Daily Mail and stuff, like, oh yeah, this amazing sabotage of, you know, getting destroyed, and therefore Russia's going to be in trouble and blah, blah, blah. Now, it was a suicide bombing. Yeah. So if when someone throws rocks in Palestine, or someone carries out a suicide bombing somewhere else, it's like all hell breaks loose on, oh yeah, Islamic extremism, blah, blah, blah. Now, this was a suicide bombing that was within their favor, you know, their agenda is promoted as a good thing. So look at the hypocrisy, you know, and you see that outright. And then you see the hypocrisy of this whole hijab issue as well, because like say in they're trying to promote it as freedoms. So in France, yeah, they ban people from wearing like hijab and stuff like that in educational establishments and stuff. Yet at the same time they go, oh yeah, we want to give freedom to the Muslim sisters in Iran to wear whatever they like. Wait there, that's completely double standards, isn't it? Or those are your standards. So those are some important things. And then my last point is that we got to understand that if someone wants to give you something because they think it's better than what you have, you need to review it. So for instance, they're trying to say, here's capitalism, democracy, liberalism, all of these things. These are our values, freedoms. Yeah. We want to give these to you because they're better than what you have. Yeah. But they fall apart straight away. So, you know, they say there was freedoms, yet, like I said, the COVID thing, you know, what their agenda was is what they promoted. When it comes to LGBT, it's their agenda which is promoted. Recently, when it was these abortion laws, it was whatever their law, they enforced it. At the same time, they say they're secular by enforcing some of these things, but they're completely in cahoots with the Zionist state. They're completely in cahoots with the Hindutva state now. Yeah. We're even seeing that this Liz Truss is trying to bring more and more Hindus into the UK in order to prop up her popularity. Yeah, because she's already allowed like 118,000 students into the country. And that has led to some of the Hindutva problems that we've seen in the likes of Leicester. Yeah. So what they try and promote, on one hand, it's like, oh, we got this thing that we want to promote to you. It's secular, it's liberal, it's freedom. But every one of those values falls on its backside when you interrogate it a little bit. You know, what happened to your secular state if you're okay to allowing a Zionist and a Hindutva state? Why wouldn't you allow, therefore, an Islamic state? Because they understand that, in fact, the Islamic values and how strong Islam is, even without proper representation at state level, how much of a threat it is to their way of life. And not just from the point of view of physical threat, they recognize that history testifies that when Islam is implemented, people prospered under it, not just Muslims, non-Muslims included, and they're fearful they'd allow a Zionist and a Hindutva state because those things are bogus, yeah. But as soon as they allow true Islam to prevail, everybody will instantly see that actually this is a better way of life in every aspect than the liberal order, the modernist order, the capitalist order. So we need to review as individuals, as Muslims especially, when they give us something, look at it and realize just what they're trying to give you.
Yeah, no, exactly, bro. Some solid points there. Brother Khair, anything you want to add, bro, at the end?
Not much else. I think you guys covered and concluded well. Just from a practical perspective, message to the Muslims is, like you said, when these incidents occur, we should always have this mentality of looking at things from a wider global perspective. So we should always take a step back and review and really analyze that incident, how it occurred, why it occurred, who is behind it, really understand it from a political perspective, and also understand what the Islamic position is on it. Do some research. What does Islam say about this? What is the Islamic rule on some of these things? And then form your opinion based on that, first and foremost. And then make sure, and don't just leave it there, but make sure that you speak to those around you. So obviously, first and foremost, your families, because your children are going to be affected by a lot of these views, right? And a lot of these messages that go around and propaganda. So find out. Don't just go to them and just tell them, okay, this is what happened and this, but find out what they're thinking. Ask them, what do you think about this? Listen to what they're saying, because no doubt they'll be getting a lot of stuff from social media, and they may have started to form that in their minds. But it's the opportunity to then break them down and present what the correct kind of understanding is, and really give them a holistic view of what's, some of the other outside type of, influences on this, and what the global agenda is. So that's first and foremost, and extend that to your communities, but also use it as an opportunity to challenge the thoughts. So when you see these bogus kind of messages and going around on social media, you might be getting WhatsApp messages just in your circles around your communities and in the masjid. Use that as an opportunity. Once you've formed your position and it's the correct one, challenge them and make sure that the Muslims understand actually what is the correct position to have, because that's the only way we will revive the ummah. And we know that the ummah is, was declined, and we're in a position of weakness now. Right now, we want to get back to a position of strength. So by doing this is one of the ways, and very important ways, of making sure that the Muslim understanding is up there, and we revive people, and really get other people to start coming on board and working and thinking that way as well. So that's my message.
Really important.
Jazakallah, bro. No, it's really, really important, and really good practical steps which we can kind of implement from now. As soon as you hear Brother Khairul's advice, put it into action, inshallah ta'ala. I know I will be doing, man. So guys, Jazakallah khair for coming on the show. It was really good to get your thoughts on this topic, and I'm sure that it's going to benefit those watching and listening, because it certainly has benefited myself. And for those who are listening and watching this podcast, if you find our message beneficial, then please don't forget to subscribe to the channels and to share this with your family and friends. And to my brothers, inshallah ta'ala, until the next one, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.